The Business Innovation Zone, also known as the Biz, is the place to start for entrepreneurs in Iowa. The Biz helps entrepreneurs and startup companies focus on idea development, business models, strategy, market validation, mentoring, and networking. We also help clients connect with qualified community and state resources needed to grow their business. Throughout the year, we provide a number of networking opportunities with experienced entrepreneurs and business leaders by offering monthly luncheons and all-day seminars on marketing and finance. You can learn more about the Biz at bizci.org.
Well, thank you all. As Mike so eloquently described my last, I think, 25 years in Des Moines and surrounding areas. I am a developer by trade. I did graduate with a comp sci degree. I cannot write a line of code anymore. So, guys like you are so much better at it. So I'd rather not do it. I think Startup City and Pico Zone are probably 7th and 8th businesses for me, and I would call businesses something that made money and served a purpose. So the first business that served a purpose for me was when I was 8 years old, and I was renting all my comic books in my neighborhood and making way more cash than my mom or dad could ever pay allowance for. And then progressively grew. And so the last company that I exited by selling to my partner, as Mike said, we wrote software for prisons in the federal, state of Iowa, and many other states' systems. We did not allow inmates on the internet. We actually went through great pains to make sure inmates could not get on the internet, but inmates could have email access. So, that set of products was quite fun. I've been to prison about 50 times in the last decade and got to leave every night on my own accord. Although the warden, there was one prison where the warden came pretty close to keeping us there because fog had rolled in, and you don't leave when fog rolls in. So anyway, that's a background. Startup City today, we launched the company almost 13 months ago, but in our space about 6 months ago. Our purpose was to serve the tech startup community in and around Des Moines. As things go, the last 6 months have brought us more into the fold of public policy and conversations on the fringes of startup communities, tech communities, immigration, all kinds of stuff. Things that we never thought possible, things that we planned not to do. We consciously said we will never get into government policy or public policy. Well, nice pipe dream. So anyway, that's a short background. We've got 9 companies officially in Startup City. We'd like to take it up to 30 as we are able to bring resources to bear for the 30. We've had 100+ applicants. Our acceptance rate has been under 10% for various reasons. Many of the applicants we have shared because the other incubators or other co-working spaces in and around the state are so much better equipped to work with some of those startups than we are. So anyway, so Andy, I think, is the only startup representative. Oh no, Jay's here too. So Andy and Jay represent Staff Ninja and employ us, two of the Startup City startups. So thanks, guys. They'll keep me honest too from the day-to-day product-related questions. My focus on products is about 14 years old. Before that, all our work was services-based. So we did for clients what clients wanted us to do, quote unquote, work for hire, and delivered the product and never owned a thing. Products where intellectual property was owned by us represented a different set of legal and accounting questions. So products for me is about 14 or so years old. So my answers to your questions will be based on what I've done and some of what I've seen. If I don't know the answer, I'll probably rely back on Mike, since his worldview extends statewide across multiple industries. So we might be tag teaming on a few of the questions. But with that, anybody who wants to take the first shot. Tim's helping me out. We'll try to get the question on microphone, and I'll try to paraphrase and repeat the questions as they come up so the recording is captured properly. Tom.
Are most of the entrepreneurs that try to get into Startup City, are most of them tech people or just business people with an idea?
Are most of the applicants to Startup City tech or business people with an idea? I answered this question yesterday for somebody else. Their thought was that Startup City must be just a bunch of geeks running around with compilers. Andy, what do you say? I think 3 developers out of 18 people who are normally there during the day. Yeah. I'd say a majority of the people who are in Startup City right now are the ones building their businesses. Our ability to respond is mainly to the tech startups. So when a magazine publisher wannabe has applied to us, we've guided them to a couple of the mentors who have come to us from Meredith. So we've said, talk to somebody who's more integrated in that business than us. We've had somebody come in wanting to do a paid fashion blog for women. Neither Christian or I have any skills in that regard. We could barely dress ourselves. so things like that, we'll guide to other resources in and around the city, but the tech ones we double click down and down further and see if there's a place for a marriage.
I recently read a book called The Coming Jobs War by Jim Clifton, in which he argues that, 1, job creation in our country is essential, and 2, the way to get there is by more and more people taking the risk to form new companies. He argues that we're really good at innovation and coming up with ideas, improving what we have, but we're less good in this country and in our metropolitan areas at encouraging people to take the risk to start up companies. I'll leave it at that and just would like to hear your thoughts on the premise of the book and on that comment.
All right. Students were looking at the portfolio and saying, why would I participate in commercializing this patent when most of the benefit goes back to the college? I would rather hold the idea in my head, get my degree, get out, and then file for the patent myself and then commercialize it myself. Innovation is happening. Clifton's right that there's not enough entrepreneurship. So as the partnership's DC trip addressed last week in DC, we were about 200 some people. One of the core topics was how do we sustain and grow the entrepreneurship in our communities. Immigration is one of those places where I am passionate about. So in addition to Clifton, Tom Friedman in That Used to Be Us talks about how we need to adjust and fix our visa policies and immigration policies so that people who are coming into this country from abroad and have demonstrated a 2 to 3x rate of starting businesses are not being encouraged to return to their home countries. Our immigration policy is flawed, it's broken. The last 3 or 4 weeks of Register articles have shown it in manufacturing, they've shown it in insurance, they've shown it in tech, more's coming. So we need to encourage entrepreneurship from K-12 levels almost. It's too late in college. By college, kids have been given the lesson of you need to go get a job. My kids, for example, today, they never hear from us that study hard so you can have a job. It's study hard so that you can start something of your own and build a company. My 5th grader and my 3rd grader both have their own Quicken accounts. So they manage their balance sheet and their income themselves. They have to. They don't have a choice. I don't want them to ever have a job. And that's the kind of attitude we almost need to inculcate in our kids. That's a part of the answer. I love that book, though. I mean, if you haven't seen or heard about that book, the first 88 pages will bore you to tears because it's a repetition of statistic upon statistic. Come around 90th page, he hits the groove, and you won't put the book down from 90th to the whatever 200-some page. An awesome book.
Name of it again?
Coming Jobs War. Chris.
It's more product related. You can choose whatever product you developed. I was curious on what the tipping point or your story is when you knew that, well, we should build this product and own it. And then also, if you have any insights of, did your clients dictate your product roadmap, or was it a combination of both? Did you have a bunch of one-off customizations? I'm just kind of curious on what your thoughts are on that.
So, let me back up a second and then I'll go forward. Okay, so product to me is a widget, whatever the widget is, that once created can be resold to the second customer. So resold, so the first customer paid for it also, but resold to the second customer without customization. So let me answer it with that as a premise. We had done so much work for hire in the past that one product that hit our mindset was inmate email. And we created the prototype, and we went out to a conference, an industry conference, and every single person who came by our booth said, "You're nuts. There is no way any warden in this country would ever allow his inmates to use email." Across the board, there was not a single person who said that this could be successful. That was the indicator that that market was going to change. Email was common for all of us by 2001, but the prison industry did not see email as a product that they would allow. So that was the point at which we knew that product had to be taken to the next step. It took several years after that before that product was in the first prison ever, but that was the day in Anaheim, California. Did I answer your full question? All right.
How do you transition from consulting services to product development, like you mentioned?
How do you transition from consulting to product development? Through pain and hunger. A lot of people would tell you, including my business partner, that you have to cut over into a product. The day you decide you're going to build a product, you have to go all in ×2. Because there are others probably gunning for and creating the same exact product, and maybe hungrier than you, and maybe smarter than you, and may have twice the size of the team than you. But I still think that you can start creating sections of your the income that you're earning to go toward purely new product development. You don't have to cut over fully. The rule of thumb I would use is go for your fixed costs. You know what your business's fixed costs are as you're trying to develop that product. Take care of the fixed costs, and then spend the rest of your time building the product. So when I first left Principal in '94, my wife had a job here downtown. Her income, so her job, paid for mortgage, groceries, utilities, and gas for the one car. Everything else was put on hold. So we spent the next 6 months doing nothing but building up that part of the business that we needed to invest in. So we just decided that second car was unnecessary. You know, we could wait on kids. We could wait on furniture in the family room. If you had walked into our house in West Des Moines in January of '95, you walk in through the front door, it was empty all the way to the kitchen. There was nothing. So you figure out what you will invest in, and if the investment has to go to the business, that's where you spend the money, and let the rest stay. That's my approach. I still think you can pay your bills through consulting or like custom dev work like you're doing, which is perfect as you build the product. Because the thing is, today you have relatively unlimited time. Once kids start coming into the picture, the unlimited aspect starts to fall. But at that time, for us in '94, it didn't matter that we were working 40 hours during the day on consulting and another 40 of the week's hours were spent at night on building something. It's still 168 hours in a week, right? You can sleep when you're dead. Other questions? Yes?
I'm really sorry I'm doing this. In the process of putting a company together and a kickoff, how far should you be thinking out in development of the ongoing? I don't know what the parameters are of what we're allowed to say.
You can ask any question.
Okay.
If I can't answer, I will tell you that, but ask away.
I have a financial literacy camp for children.
Okay.
It kicks off in Waukee in August. I've been test driving it with camps for 2 years. I have books and apps, etc. And I'm already in my mind as an entrepreneur thinking of how to take it into the next 6 months and next year's programs. Is that, besides working on the campers, which is my key component right now because I have all the other things in place, am I wasting my time thinking out? I mean, I don't know. I don't have a mentor.
Let me rephrase your question, and I'm going to ask you to get that mentor because that person's in this room, so who can help you with that next question. So, first off, thank you for doing the type of business you're doing because it's rare. So I think from my prior answer, you already know that I connect with the charter of your business. So your question is, how far ahead should you think as you're building out your business from where you are today at the onset, at the launch of the business? I'm going to steal something from Mike's playbook. A lot of times people will ask, as Mike will ask people, what's your commercialization strategy? And they'd say, my first 100 customers will come from X. And his answer, I think almost always invariably is, tell me how your first customer will come to you. So you've got your first set of customers identified for the summer. You've got the camp set up. Hopefully you've got the camp set up by now. I would say focus as best as you can on every one of those kids graduating from the camp, learning from the camp, and being ready to apply their lessons from the camp come fall. Somewhere around the middle of summer, when you've delivered perfect service to these kids, the kids will feed back to you what you need to be thinking of for your second class and the third class and so on. But focus on these first very referenceable customers because these are the ones that the rest of your business is founded on. So I wouldn't go two years out. I would say summer, and halfway through the summer, look at the fall. Mike, would you?
Yeah, I absolutely agree because what so often happens is your first 10 customers change where you're going to go. Your first 5 customers say, that's great, but have you ever thought about this? And suddenly you're going down a different path. And as long as it's something that all your customers want to go down, or the majority, I think it's really smart to not plan too far out. You want to know where you're going in general, but having a perfect 3-year plan, they usually don't survive the first 6 months.
Forgive me, my allergies are acting up. I'm an instructor at Des Moines Area Community College, and we, of course, are fighting our own jobs war. And we're trying to get kids ready for the real world, and particularly the business world. If I would contract with you to create a curriculum, 2-year curriculum, what do you want to see in the workers of the future?
What does my industry, so the tech industry, want to see from workers in the future? No, actually, I'd say almost close to today. I don't want any developer, any computer science graduate coming to me with a language stuck to them as a religion. I want them to be able to learn any language because within 6 months, whatever business I'm in, I'm going to be switching languages on them. So if they show a strong preference, almost a religious affinity to a language, they may be perfect in that world. They may have 6.9 GPA in that group. They are the least relevant to me at that time. As the developers in this room will tell you, they switch languages almost as frequently as they change clothes, probably, just daily.
Forgive me, I teach psychology and forensic pathology. When you say language, are you talking about language, or are you talking about computer language?
I'm talking about programming languages for
Okay,
computers. I've had a 4-year graduate from one of our Regents universities sit in an interview with a perfect GPA. And one of my first questions to her was, what is it that you want to do in the next 6 months? And her response back was, I've been learning so much the last 4 years, I want to quit learning for the next 6 months and do my job and go home and lay out in the sun. How do you finish a 45-minute interview at the 6th minute was a skill I learned that day. So you want learners. You don't want graduates with a degree who've learned it all. You want those who are now more interested in learning than they were 4 years ago.
Okay, so you're saying basically flexibility and the ability to, I call it toleration of ambiguity. It's the ability to move yourself in many different directions.
Sure. I mean, the degree I graduated with lends nothing to my day-to-day work today. And yes, agreed, it was 21 years ago, but still it doesn't.
Thank you.
Sure. I think there was a question back there.
What would be your views on partnerships? How many partners are too many? And if you find yourself lacking an area of expertise, would you just go hire it? Would you find a like-minded partner and take them in?
So what's my view on partnership, and would I rather hire a resource or build up n number of partners until it's just right? So the last time I was here, it was about the breakup of partnerships. That one wasn't recorded, so unfortunately you can't go there to look at it. 2 partners is too many. So going from 1 to 2 is too many in my book. Partners add a lot of value. Partners grow the business, especially if they're complementary. But partnership has to end at a certain point. So the line I used in my last session was, you get married in front of friends, family, a religious ceremony, with vows, with society rules and regulations. And 40+% of those marriages break up. What prayer does your partnership have? But many partners who go in want to go into that relationship thinking it'll last forever. I did too. It doesn't work that way. And eventually you will get to a point where the partnership will become the cause of struggle in your business's growth. If you had the money to hire the resource, I would go hire the resource. I would not get into the partnership agreement. You're going to spend more money up front. If you're smart, you're going to spend the money on the buy-sell up front. Most people don't. As I think both Chris and Jason would tell you in this room, most people will not spend the right amount of money on the buy-sell agreement up front. And when those who don't spend the money on the buy-sell agreement up front spend even more at the end getting the divorce. So if you can afford it, go hire it. Would either of the attorneys wish to comment? I know you guys are on film also talking about these things, so. I'm sorry, I should have said 3 because Matt's here too. I didn't see you back there. Sorry.
Primarily to just to echo what you've said, but the reality is a lot of times why a partner? You know, if it's a partner because it's a strategic skill set that they bring to the table that's unique to them and complements you, that's a good reason for partnership. If it's because you think equity is free or cheaper than dollars, you'll find out in the long run, and even more so the more successful you are, the more expensive it was. So to Tej's comment, if you can afford to hire it, hire it. I agree with that completely.
Okay, so I've got a question. One of the things that's been a trend lately is the number of schools that are providing online certificates for competencies in a variety of skills, whether it's, I think it's edX through MIT and Harvard, or some of the things being done out of Stanford, but the idea is that rather than having four-year degrees from a traditional university, that we're going to have a series of people coming out maybe at high school age, 18, 19, 20, that have fully certificated themselves through one of these great institutions without the degree, but have all the skill sets. What do you think that means for startups especially?
What do I think the trend of part formal, part informal degrees means to startups? I think many times as we were describing what Startup City would be like, we were describing it as a college dorm room atmosphere. Those of you who've been there would probably agree. It's more of a frat house than a dorm room, but work still gets done, and a lot of work gets done. I'm a big believer in four-year colleges. Whether it's 4 years that start off at a place like DMAC and end up at the traditional four-year university or college, or just straight from high school to a college degree, for multiple reasons. One, you don't just learn the content of the curriculum. You learn the interaction with your peers, which you are going to have to use in your work world, whether you're a 2-person startup or a 15-person startup. If we look at the history of startups from pre-Microsoft in Albuquerque to Facebook at least, and maybe even beyond, most of these startups were started in traditional four-year colleges because you had like-minded people who were working together and building on the ideas that they were discussing over beer or whatever anyway. I personally hope that the trend becomes an accretive trend, so that if I am taking computer science courses at Iowa State, I complement my four-year education with the artificial intelligence course that's coming out of Stanford or out of MIT, or the iOS development course coming out of Stanford, than say, I'm going to learn my programming curricula from the Stanford University course, I think is what they call it. I hope that the traditional conversation in a classroom is how our workforce still develops, because we have not quite made that jump of just impersonal learning. I learned through those courses today, but that's after having made my base of learning with the professors and fellow students. So I still, to this day, it's 21, 22 years later, I'm still in touch with my professors from Central. And if I run into questions, I do ping them, and vice versa. So there's value to that education, and especially those of you who are in continuing ed anyway, whether it is in the accounting, legal, actuarial professions, you know that continuous learning happens with professors who became peers in your professional career. So my view. Others?
Yeah, Tej, talk a little bit about your product, and when you have a product that you've already, it's about ready to go out the door, you're using certain technology, and all of a sudden there's this great leap in technology, and now you decide, oh, maybe I should be updating, and I mean, you could go forever and never get it out the door, and I just kind of wonder what your thoughts are as far as putting that type of thing together.
To paraphrase, when do you ship it?
There you go.
You don't ship it on a date that you artificially decided. So if you're the marketer and somebody said that this conference is the most important thing in my life, and the product has to be shipped 3 days before that conference, no, because then you'll rush the product. But you have to come up with what Eric Ries calls the minimum viable product. What is it that your customers will be able to use, be willing to pay for, and have a pleasant experience using your product? At that point, you have to ship it. Inc. magazine has Jason Fried write articles from the tech sector. And Jason wrote about this one product that they shipped just about 3 or 4 months ago. And every single person, including his board, was telling him, let's add this feature, let's add that feature. And his gut said that the product had all of the elements that they had thought about. It was customer ready, it was payments ready, it was feature complete as they had planned it. It had to ship there. So otherwise you'll be stuck in analysis paralysis because there's always a better language, there's always a better UI, there's always the color scheme changes. You know, the orange and green color schemes of 8 months ago on websites are now giving way to a different color scheme. You could keep changing and never ship. But my thing would be, don't let analysis paralysis own you. And if, at least in the tech world, if your product is taking more than 6 months in the development life cycle, you've already started killing it. You don't believe in the product enough to get it shipped in 6 months. So mine would be get it done and get it out in 6 months or less.
Tej, how have you historically identified a product need that you wanted to develop? And maybe a follow-up question to that would be, if your mind works like a lot of creative people's do, and you've now identified at any given time 5, 10, 15 ideas, do you have a process, or have you ever taken an idea, licensed it out to somebody else, or passed it on? What do you do? First, how do you develop ideas for products? And second, what do you do when you have more ideas than you can develop?
For me, how do I develop ideas for products? Ideas tend to come from reading. Whether it's fiction or nonfiction, ideas keep coming. So I was reading one of the Wired magazine articles recently, and in the reading of that article, I thought, you know, I recently read a book that had gone down a path of developing an idea that they had read about it in another book. Can I make fiction out of this real story, this factoid in this book, in this article? So I said, write it down, and maybe I'll come back to it. There was a similar idea. I was in a financial planning meeting with somebody, and they were the client and the service provider kept talking about that no tool existed to deal with that little nuanced part of the product. Wrote it down, started doing research on it. So the book idea, for example, I'd been sitting there thinking, and I was on a flight, 18-hour flight, so you don't have much to do. And I was going through my Evernote ideas section, thinking, is this a good blog post? Is it a good article post, or could it be a book? And I said, let me write the first and the last chapter, and see where it goes. So it was that prototype development. So my prototype was the beginning and the ending. I don't know if it'll go somewhere, but it's an idea that has moved from just a single line idea to now a prototype. And we'll keep developing on it, and someday it might come up. The second one, which was the financial product, I have been talking to developers about just that nuance. And you have to have the right kind of person for fairly detailed statistical analysis of that little area. So I have not grown up enough to license an idea yet. So. Jay.
When developing a marketing plan for a product release, do you base that off of your financial limitations, or do you develop your marketing plan based off of what needs to happen for the product to be successful, and then figure out a way of securing those finances at a later date?
Do you create the marketing plan based on what you have or what you need? I would create it based on what I need, because what I have is almost always going to be limited. But what I need is the reach. So if the reach for my product is these 20 specific conferences, and without that market penetration, I'm not going to go somewhere, I have to find a way to invest in those 20 conferences. Otherwise, I'm doing the product and the rest of the team and the other investors, including my family that invested in me spending the time, injustice. That's, again, my feeling. Mike, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that when you're trying to develop a marketing plan, marketing isn't a linear thing, right? It's not linear that you put $1 in, you get $1.10 worth back. In a lot of cases, companies do $1 million worth of marketing just to get their first customer on a new product. That seems insane sometimes, but for larger companies, that's the way they do it. So you have to think about what that first step is you want to reach. And if you said, my first step is to get to 500 users, or 100 users, or 100 products sold, I think you have to build a marketing plan that gets you to that first step. And I think when you're, especially if you're doing a high growth business where you know you're going to probably have to raise money at some point, usually what you're trying to do with that very first marketing money is get enough validation from the market that a serious investor will look at you seriously and say, wow, you got 500 users with that much money on your own. Cool. So it's not that you're always trying to get to break even or profitability. In a lot of cases, you're just trying to show that you're relevant, that what you built matters to somebody. Is that fair? Mm-hmm. Tej, I got a question for you if I can. I see a lot of people come in that have development skills, whether it's code development in the software space, EE, electrical engineering development skills, mechanical engineering skills, and they get an idea for the product, and the first thing they do is go build the product. And I'd like you to talk about your thoughts about just building the product versus prototype and feedback.
As much as you might know about a product, you as the guy with the idea doesn't know enough. So to answer the question that, when do you solicit customer feedback or potential customer feedback? As early and as often in that process as possible. Customer feedback, customer opinion, customer style of using your product doesn't have to be based on a functioning prototype. It can be based on a PowerPoint. It can be based on hand-drawn screens. The process of user-centered design starts with hand-drawn prototypes on a single sheet of paper. These processes don't have to take long. They can, one of our products that we built up, the entire user experience was drawn up on cocktail napkins on a flight from DC to Chicago in the back row of a United flight, honest to God. It's on video. The entire user experience was on those United napkins. Not too many of them either. And the product, I believe, is still in use today. You can get customer feedback off of anything, including a cocktail napkin. It doesn't have to be huge storyboards. But if you don't get customer feedback early on, everything you're developing is based on your knowledge of their industry. And it's almost always wrong. There's a lot of development in this community around handheld point of sale systems. So we hear a lot of pitches at Startup City. I know Mike has heard. I know several of you have probably seen or heard those pitches. So the other day, a few of us were sitting at the Royal Mile, and the waitress had a few questions, and we just turned around and started asking her questions. None of us are building that product, but we just wanted to see what she thought and whether the pitches we're hearing are in sync. And many of the things that she was talking about have never come into the product mix on the point of sale products. And here is a classic example of the real user who happened to work at 2 restaurants, right? And yeah, she works at 2 different restaurants and has experience from alcohol to appetizers to dinner and lunch. And she spent that 10 minutes in the busy lunch hour just answering our questions. You got to get that feedback. And you have to get that feedback before you spend time on developers building the product. Because after building the product, it costs 2 to 3 times as much to fix it, as Microsoft learned so well. You know, it's a 3rd version that is finally usable. And that's actually, this is a lesson it's a lesson I learned from a person at Microsoft. His name was Bob McDowell. He used to describe himself as the only guy with gray hair in the late 90s at Microsoft. And Bob had a meeting of all the Microsoft partners, and we were one of them on Seattle campus. And his comments back to us was, every single thing you're doing is going to be used by a user outside of your organization. You got to get that user. Pay them if you have to. Sign them up as volunteers as if you have to. Or as Christian Gurney said last month, right? I mean, he had people coming off the street testing the product, and he paid them for the prototype testing long before the final product was developed. Got to get it early. Other questions? Yes.
Can you offer any guidance on how much, maybe a sort of a benchmark or a range of how much of revenue should be reinvested back into product development?
How much reinvestment should you do in product development? At which stage of the company?
Maybe how about a range of different stages?
Early stages, I would say 100% of your revenue should be reinvested. I'm an Apple shareholder, and I don't think I've ever received a dividend yet, so they're still reinvesting in their company. Microsoft just started issuing dividends 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I think. So the companies that have grown incredibly have continually reinvested in their people and their product. I think whether you look at Google or Microsoft or others at that level, they not only reinvest the money in the company, they also say that the people in that company should be spending a good part of their time thinking about R&D. R&D comes from the ground up, and Clifton talks about that in Coming Jobs War, that there has to be reinvestment. You will never know if a new product idea comes from the junior most person. In fact, it's highly likely it'll come from the person who's farthest removed from the process than the actual R&D team. Which is why events like Startup Weekend that have been community-wide events are now becoming attractive to corporations, where they're saying, we cannot release our intellectual property by letting our employees participate in community events, so we'll just bring the event in-house. We'll open up the event so that people start investing their time and their money, and then we as a company will invest. I would say if you're just starting a tech company, plan on 100% investment. Five years at least. I'm making that number up, but I can't imagine anything less than 5 years will give you a true opportunity to pull cash out. In fact, if you reinvest, you'll be able to pull more cash out later. So. And that pulling cash out doesn't mean not drawing a salary, but drawing down the cash reserves that you're building up. So. Melissa.
If you started your business, how long would you give it before until you decided it was time for a change, or how long would you give it to where you need to take it to the next level?
How long before you
let's say
implement
let's say I want to work with 100 clients next year. What would be the cutoff to be where I would decide this is just not working, or this is going to rock and I just need to give it more time?
More than an advisor, the people who are going to give you that answer are your customers. If you're going to 100 customers and you have 3 today, there's a good chance that you will lose all 3 of them by the time you get to the other 100, because they are used to a different relationship with you than the relationship they'll have as one of the 103. But the first, second, or third customer will help you get to the 4th, 5th, and 6th. So if you're thinking of a market change like that from 3 to 100, it's different. If you're thinking 75 to 100, it's, again, your customers, your core customers will tell you when is the right time. But if your marketing strategy today or your product strategy today is not helping you get the new kind of customer, you know already that you need to change. It's a tough answer. That you have to be on the ground, and your employees sometimes, but mostly your customers will guide you better than anybody outside can. Mike, would you add there? I'm not happy with my answer because it's a non-answer.
No, I don't think it's a non-answer. I mean, I think the question is, do you stop or do you pivot or do you go on to something else? I have one I'm involved with where we need to pivot. It's not working. Just to tell you a little bit more about it, every potential client we've had look at the product says, wow, great, that's a cool product. I can see how I could use that. And then we get to, would you buy it? They say, no. And it's 100%. And what we learned was, yeah, they all see it as a useful, viable product, and no, they're not going to pay for it. And we can debate that all day long, why that is, even though they know there's hardcore value, and a few people that did pay for it are seeing value, but the truth is it didn't work. We gave it about 6 months. We did probably somewhere south of 25,000 in marketing. We did a lot of one-on-one. We did a lot of mass reach. And we did it 4 or 5 different ways, and we found out that it just wasn't going to work. And so now we've got to find another path. I think the question is not, do they like it? The question is, are they buying it? Okay? And I think that's one of the biggest challenges for any entrepreneur is you can get a lot of people to tell you they like your product. It's a lot harder to get somebody to say, yes, I will sign a contract, I'll get up my credit card, I'll hand you $20 bills, whatever that is. And I think you really have to use that as, especially if you're trying to grow something on your own and you're not out raising $10 million with this national marketing campaign. If you're bootstrapping, by nature, you have to get to the next client. You have to have enough money to get to the next one. And so if you're consistently hitting that wall where no one's willing to pay for what you have, you've got to start asking them why not and dig into the why. And by the way, one of the best techniques I know, when a customer says no to you, that's when the best learning happens. Say, Tom here is someone I know quite well. Tom, I understand you don't want to buy my product now. Can I have 10 minutes of your time? Let's talk about why not. Please, just be brutally honest with me and tell me why not. What's missing? Is it just not relevant to you? Be honest with me. You've said no, I'm not trying to sell you anymore. That's when you get the best feedback. But I think you have to ask those questions of the people that say no to you.
Kevin.
Go without the microphone. How do you decide with low capital, low investments, going back to that same idea, taking that bootstrap to the next level? Anybody who's an entrepreneur has great confidence in themselves, right? They know they can do a lot of things. How do you know when to take that piece off the table? And you don't have the cash just to go hire another developer. How do you, and you could do it yourself, get to market in 2 years, or come up with an alternate solution. How do you make those type of decisions?
I think most of us who call ourselves entrepreneurs or live that life know that we are delusional to quite an extent. I think that's a fairly common trait. So how do you face the truth? Is that a fair question? All right. So I think Mike's point is valid. I've got a similar point in my my current startup, where it's a email product, parent managed email product for kids. So kids 6 to 12 years old who want access to email can't normally just go, well, they can lie on Gmail or Hotmail and get an account, but to get real email, they have to have parental approval. And I thought I could sell it to schools. The PTOs are always raising money. You always get those of you who are parents, you've gotten the entertainment books, you've gotten the Christmas ornaments and whatnot. So I thought I could go to the PTOs and sell through PTOs. And the PTOs told me that that's not an educational product. They didn't have an answer, how is an entertainment book an educational product? But email was not an educational product. So shift to the homeschooler market, which is a group of parents that is more concerned about what their kids see and do than the normal public school system. Had a good amount of success. Is it something that'll grow the company into 1 million users? Probably not. The homeschool market is not that large. So at what point do I start saying, okay, this is taking too much time and I need to focus on another idea? Gut. I look at the user count daily, but more important than the user count and the subscription count to me is the usage count by the current subscribers. If I see the 50-day and the 200-day moving average for my users, on a downward trend with no recovery, I know it's in. So I will do it through numbers because I prefer Excel spreadsheets over something else. For some of you, an advisor will tell you, it's time to cut the cord and focus on the next business. In my case, it's numbers. I start my morning with Google Analytics and my usage report. Not subscriber report, usage report. Because actual usage of my product is way more indicative of future success, because those kids and those parents will tell others about the product than how many new subscribers I gained today. Did I get to the heart of the question? Thanks. Stan.
I guess a question I have, in your experience over the years of watching all of this stuff happen, when an entity either doesn't make it or they truly fail or whatever, how often is it an issue of something maybe incorrect or off the mark in terms of the product or the original concept versus the challenges of doing the true business development side of things to go, you got the greatest product in the world, but if you can't figure out how to go to get to your customers and build that user base and stuff, I mean, where do you see the break point, in your experience?
I see more products die from lack of sufficient marketing and lack of attention to the customer. So they kind of go hand in hand. Getting user input during design is marketing. Right. And selling the finished product to the potential end users is marketing. A lot of products die because they didn't talk to enough customers in the amount of time before the final breath ran out, right? More than that the product is too early or too brain dead. Because if you saw the need for a product that you developed, there's a good chance others did too. And that's one of the things we tell, and we tell most people who come with ideas and aren't quite sure whether they should develop. Well, you have the idea, but contemporary ideas are not limited to downtown Des Moines. Those same ideas, Instagram has 10 other copycats in the industry, maybe 100 other copycats. You see ideas come up concurrently in the marketplace, and not necessarily the best capitalized ideas survive, but it's really the ones that captured the biggest market, both through input and sales. Now, speaking back to failure, I think a person who has failed and is willing to talk about it is a better bet for the next product than the one who says, I did this and it's awesome and I'm going to keep plugging because it has a good future. I think we as this community, the Des Moines community, has not yet had the opportunity to recognize, celebrate, and learn as much from failure as we could have. It's becoming a topic of conversation in more of these sessions, but it hasn't quite reached that level yet of conversation. How many of you are in product development right now, active product development? It's a pretty good number. 5. Oh, 5 more minutes, okay. All right, so shoot out 5 biggest problems you're going through, one at a time, if you would. None? Wow. I need I need to sit down. You should be up here. Oh. The biggest one is. Yeah. Honestly, I would say if you recognize a problem, there are a lot of people in this town who are willing to step up and help and just answer a question. All you're doing is buying them a coffee or a beer. So ask, and chances are the individuals will be able to help very quickly, very easily, and literally voluntarily. Yes?
We've run into a problem that you pretty much already identified in that, we've had an idea that we've been trying to go forward with without really engaging our market, our customers. And so we really need to go back and spend a lot more time with them, talking with other people, saying, hey, is this something that you would use? And if so, is it something that you would buy?
Yeah.
And that's you know, that's been a good takeaway for me from today.
If you have not spoken with your real customers yet on a product you're about to develop, that product's going to go through two or three iterations before you'll be able to get it publicly usable and customers happy. Same guy, Bob McDowell, his statement used to be customer delight. The product that Microsoft was putting out had to cause customer delight. And the product he was responsible for was the development studios. You had people firing guns and cannons at all of Microsoft products, but the development products were successful out the gate because they were talking to their software developers all the time. They had lots of feedback. Those products didn't have service patches. They were happy customers, happy products. So, yeah, got to talk to customers.
All right, Tej, thank you very much.
Sure.